What I'd like to do now is to give you a flavour of the real world decision making, if you like, turn from metrics to action, and bring you some examples just to illustrate the challenges from the public health work that PRAC does. So I'll talk about what PRAC has delivered in the first 2 years of operation, mention the challenges and opportunities, and then move on to PRAC's current focus, how we move from simply complying with the new legislation to actually optimally using it. A quick reminder of PRAC's broad mandate, and it is a very broad mandate, getting involved right from the days of a new medicine coming through to clinical use, life cycle benefit risk monitoring, taking action on new signals, and taking into account the therapeutic context in terms of all the new safety data that come to us. If you would like a good read, I heartily recommend the Nature Reviews Drug Discovery that came out in around April-May time, which gives you the overall story of the first 18 months. And if that's a little too long or inaccessible, please do just turn to the website and you'll see from last Friday's highlights an overview of PRAC's first 2 years. And that gives you again another nice picture of the various issues that PRAC has tackled. So what do you actually say? Is it the 22 meetings or the 600 risk management plans, the 150 protocol reviews, the 650 PSURs, the 163 signals, or the 31 referrals? These really are just dimensions of a public health approach and tools for us to deliver that as we do our work. Month on month, we see about, I think, 140, 150 items, and that is bedding in. I think when you saw the graph, probably many of you a year ago, you thought, will this be sustained? Is it an upward trajectory? But in actual fact, it's bedding in to a very manageable 4 days' work, but 4 pretty full days, I should say. What have been the clear objectives? Proactively investigating drug safety using risk management plans. That has rightly been top of the list, and our focus on honing those post-authorization studies and undertaking continuous signal detection. Then, secondly, responding to safety and benefit risk issues with robust scientific decisions to prompt and rigorous timescales. Thirdly, driving forward the new era in transparency, real-time access to information as much as is possible on PRAC's activities and being open in our deliberations. And the fourth objective, to increase stakeholder involvement in decision-making, health professionals, patients and the public. I won't say so much about the fourth theme because you'll be hearing about it later in this afternoon's session. So how have we been doing? Let's start with the first theme, proactive investigation of drug safety. And this has been part of the paradigm shift, if I can call it that, from reactive vigilance to proactive investigation of drug safety. And that has really been a sea change in the whole approach. The proactive filling in of gaps in our knowledge via the risk management plans and post-authorization safety study protocols have been PRAC's major priority. Our experts appointed by the Commission in pharmacoepidemiology provide specialist contributions on design and methodology, and words like feasibility come up all the time. Are we making recommendations that are really going to happen and move our understanding forward? And we very much support innovative approaches to safety in clinical use. For example, you might have read about the study being done on a new inhaled corticosteroid, long-acting beta-agonist combination in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And that is looking not just at safety, but we're thinking about effectiveness at the same time. And another example, an old drug for a new use, working closely with CHMP to be sure that the studies on propranolol for this interesting and important condition, the infantile hemangioma, actually include real-life monitoring of growth effects. So these are all the sorts of thoughts that we have to bring to bear, not simply, can we just get a study up and running? What about signal monitoring? This is a slide that you may have seen briefly going past, but the important message here is that when we look at our continual monitoring of signals, we are looking at about half of them resulting in updates to product information to give the best possible information to those who use medicines. And only a small proportion, probably 6–7% there at the top, resulting in formal referrals. And all of this is proceeding smoothly with a high level of cooperation from the industry. Couple of examples just from last week to bring signals to life and the challenges they pose. Here is a signal, chlorhexidine used for preterm infants to put in umbilical catheters. Now, how do we fully understand the therapeutic challenges there? If we should suggest a formulation change to minimize risk of chemical burns, what would the impact be on overall safety? And so a real need to liaise with paediatric specialists. Here's another one, fentanyl patch and medication error following the action taken by the FDA. And again, it brings home how we're applying our pharmacovigilance tools in the context of the broader definition of adverse drug reaction, which now includes medication error. So watch this space. It's an important and interesting aspect of our work when we're looking at root cause analysis rather than the usual EBGM scores. Proactive monitoring in signal detection is the source of our only standing group. We have a standing group, the Signal Management Review Team, to look at tools and processes, methodological guidance, and signal detection methodologies, constantly reviewing how well we're doing with the inflow of information that Peter has highlighted to you into Vigilance week by week and month by month, as well as other sources of signals. So a really important focus scientifically for PRAC. What about our second theme, promptly responding to benefit-risk issues as they arise? And a key deliverable of the new legislation has been delivering binding outcomes from referrals. We need to adhere rigorously to legal timeframes, and thankfully the team here at EMA make absolutely sure that that happens. And you've also heard about the importance now of the periodic safety update report as a key opportunity for benefit-risk review and decision-making. So you've seen the numbers a moment ago. Just let me highlight again how many are being started, 15 or so a year, and how many are being completed, again, as I've stressed, to prompt timeframes. Just a quick look-see at what's in there, and really to highlight that the Article 31 benefit risk is still taking the lion's share of the applications of the referrals through. And you'll see as you glance at the Article 31s how many established old medicines have been looked at and the challenges that those pose when we're looking at evidence to modern day standards. You may have thought there would be greater use of the urgent union procedure, and maybe that's what we'll see going forward, but it hasn't been the picture to date. Ongoing referrals, here are the ones that we're still working on at the moment, and that again will highlight to you only 2 of those are new medicines, ponatinib and ivabradine, the rest established medicines with all the challenges these bring looking at the benefit risk. So the outcomes PRAC considers are a range of actions proportionate to risk, taking into account the therapeutic context, and that can be a range of tools applied, but again, focusing always on timely delivery, an average of 7 months, but ranging from 1 to 16. Only a fifth the urgent union procedures, and involving a scientific advisory group in around a quarter. So here's a list of challenges and opportunities, just as a starter. Getting the best scientific evidence, looking at the established medicines that are used in diverse ways across Europe, involving stakeholders in the decision-making process, and that challenge of the extended definition of what an adverse drug reaction means. So yes, we're interfacing with academia. We have a colleague in PRAC who's a standing link with the NCEP network. We are having SAG advice on therapeutic context in a reasonable proportion of our procedures, and that reaches out to the clinicians right across the EU, experts in their field. We are beginning to involve patient groups, and that's a steady, stepwise approach. You'll be hearing about public hearings later on this afternoon. And then there's the issues around medication error, misuse, and so forth, new territory for many of our pharmacovigilantes. 1 or 2 examples maybe to give you a flavour of how this thinking applies. Diclofenac and cardiovascular risk was a good example of an evidence decision cycle, generating the evidence here with the European Commission funded work and then taking an important public health decision on cardiovascular risk with diclofenac. And what about an old medicine, domperidone, making sure that we had the best pharmacoepidemiological evidence in a robust study looking at cardiovascular issues in the over 60s. And that was an important piece of evidence contributing to restriction of indications and so forth to find a population in whom benefit risk was favourable. And here's an example of where reaching out to patients and their families is highly relevant. The ongoing referral for sodium valproate in pregnancy with the growing evidence of risk of developmental disorders in children born to women who have of necessity been treated with valproate during pregnancy. And this has been, as I say, a stepwise approach to involving patient representatives in delivering decisions. Finally, I would mention methadone. You may have noticed in July an interesting decision on a medicine containing high molecular weight povidone to minimise the risk of injection for oral use, but having to minimise risk standing back because in this population of drug abuse patients who are being treated, injection and misuse is an inherent issue. So you see how the different tools have to be applied and liaison with another body, the European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction. So I hope that helps to bring a little bit to life some of the challenges of operating in the new environment. A brief word about the important periodic safety update reports. If you glance at the highlights from Friday, you'll see the outturn of the PSUR on agamelatine, looking at how well risk minimisation has been working in relation to hepatotoxicity. And you'll also remember the other important benefit risk considerations around strontium ranulate and cardiovascular risk and pheromoxetol, colloidal ion and hypersensitivity reactions. I would also like to highlight, though, the evolving experience with the single PSUR assessment, and I know we'll be talking more about that. The third theme, advancing the era of transparency. This enormous sea change in our efforts to operate openly, and I hope you'll have a chance to look at, if you haven't already, the regulatory rapporteur article done and led by Ulva, the major advances in transparency, and it really does help to put into context all those step-by-step approaches that have been taken, reminding you that to publish the agenda before the meeting, the highlights on the Friday of the same week, as of the same week, those safety referrals that have been started, and full minutes the following month. This really has been an enormous step forward. So where now? If you read the meeting highlights, you'll get a feeling that those highlights are getting a bit more expansive, and you'll realise that we're considering moving forward not just with referrals, but other important aspects of PRAC's work. So please do watch this space, all intended to operate in a climate of transparency. And never has it been more important for coordination of communications as in the example here, the huge review of combined hormonal contraceptives and thromboembolism that involved 9 new progestins, and EMA's role coordinating communications at member state level has never been more important, so that when there was inevitably some misplaced communications, highly alarmist, that member states, as of here in the UK, were ready to completely dismiss and refute the hype that was put about. And this is a very good example of the importance of coordination. So our current focus, briefly to highlight some of the things that you've already heard about from Peter, certainly there has to be a focus on efficiency, sharing the work, establishing the efficiencies of the legislation, such as the single PSUR procedure, looking at opportunities in generic risk management plans, building the effective committee interfaces. We are a family of committees, not self-standing at EMA, strengthening the science, more about that later today, and building engagement. I would like to highlight, in case you think that it's a hardy few member states who are undertaking the major reviews, there are 18 in the 2 years outturn who've all worked together to shoulder that scientific assessment work. And in terms of triggering referrals, again, it's an expanding number of member states identifying issues and ready to place them at EU for review. Intercommittee collaboration is now being assisted by inter-committee scientific advisory groups. So PRAC last week had the privilege of an intercommittee SAG, as we call them, on oncology, advising us so as to be directly involved with those experts at EU level. Collaboration with the Paediatric Committee, if you read the report of the workshop, PDCO and PRAC are working together to improve safety for children. And again, top of the list of the guideline development is the revision of Paediatric Pharmacovigilance Guideline. And now it's timely given the new tools in the EU pharmacovigilance legislation. We've heard from Peter about the good vigilance practice population modules, and I'd like to emphasise important work being done on the P module, population being the elderly, and the product modules, biologic medicines being top of the list there. Pharmacogenetics and pharmacovigilance has been the guideline subject to consultation. Incorporating new methodologies and building on best practices, in addition to the areas we're going to hear about, such as scope and IMI, I'd like to highlight the CIOMS guideline recently published on risk minimisation, all of this best practice to be incorporated in PRAC's thinking. And of course, reaching out and listening to those who use medicines. And I again emphasise how important it is that in all the languages around the EU, patients are being exhorted to report and reminded of how to do that. So our roadmap, as you've heard, is to get the best evidence that can possibly be brought to bear on our decisions, to use the methodologies and tools that are state-of-the-art, to build capacity, to engage with stakeholders, and, as Peter has highlighted, the ultimate is to evaluate what difference all of this has made. So in summary, I hope I've really convinced you that PRAC has been central to the implementation of the new legislation. The first 2 years' focus has been absolutely public health protection. Experience has demonstrated that yes, we can deliver robust decisions to rigorous timescales, and that we can take major strides in transparency without disrupting the trust and confidence in regulation that is so important to all stakeholders. So now we're moving from compliance to optimization, and the credit goes to the people in this picture here who are more than ready for the next big step over the next year. Thank you very much indeed.